Hello and welcome to Bespoke Unit, I'm CP and in this video I'm reviewing the Plasencia Alma del Campo. As per usual, this cigar review was conducted using the Bespoke Unit Cigar Formula, a quantifiable review matrix that you can either use at home or use as a quick reference if you don't have time to watch the entirety of this video. Just look in the description where you'll find a link to the final written review of this cigar, and you'll see a PDF version which will give you a full breakdown of the cigar. Furthermore, these cigars were stored using the Boveda acrylic humidor that you can see here. In fact, you can just see their little foot bands just there. They were stored in this for a period of 3 weeks using 69% Boveda packs to ensure that they'd been properly acclimated and prepared for the review. Released at the 2017 IPCPR, Alma del Campo means soul of the field, and indeed this is a Nicaraguan puro that consists of Plasencia's own tobaccos. Unfortunately, I don't have much more information other than that it is a Nicaraguan puro, which means that the wrapper, binder and filler all consist of Nicaraguan tobaccos, so I can't tell you what precise terroirs or regions were used. Nevertheless, it is rolled at the Plasencia Cigars factory just off Esteli, and it is made using an accordion method, as can be seen on the foot. Well, with that short overview being done, let's go straight into the look and feel. One thing you'll notice is that it has a very straight roll. It's almost rock hard. It is so firm. That being said, it is beautifully crafted with very refined veins and a rich oily sheen. It has a pale milk chocolate hue, which can be kind of deceptive because this isn't the first one I've had, and the first one I had kind of made my head spin and made me feel a bit queasy. Indeed, this is a nicotine bomb. It is quite full-bodied, but we're going to look into further detail rather than just a simple assessment with this detailed review. The aromas off the foot, as I've written here, consist of cacao, some moist earth, and a sort of zesty acidic leather. Moving on to the Prelight, as you can see, I've already cut this with a straight cut. So as I noted, the draw is a little bit on the tight side. The airflow is somewhat restricted. You can either use a poke or you can massage it to make it better. Having said that, there are Alma del Campos that I've had in the past that weren't so tight. This just could be a one-off. You'll see in the written review, as I smoke several others to do my final write-up, whether this is the case in general or not. In terms of flavour, it's quite rich. There is a slight fruitiness, which I would liken to black cherry, as well as the same cacao and moist earth that were picked up on the aromas on the foot. With that all being said, it's time to light this up. Right, first third, so far so good. Look at that burn line, looks great, and a beautifully white, steely grey ash. I'm really enjoying the cigar so far. It's not quite what it's not as overpowering as I remember. And that being said, it's still early days. A lot can change in the second and final third. So far, the composition of the flavor profile consists of some notes of spices on the tip of the tongue, which notably anise. There's just that slight aniseed tint, as well as some coffee beans and a yeasty sourdough finish, especially on the retrohale. That being said, there seems to be a lot more going on. It's quite complex, but those are the three notes that really stick out in my mind. Let's see how this gets on in the second third. And he's back, second third. As you can see, there's a little bit of waviness here on the bird line, but otherwise, so far so good. One thing I forgot to mention earlier is this is the 5x52 Tribute, which is a Robusto. And because it's the smaller side, I had to remove the band as I get to the halfway point. In fact, I think I singed the end a little bit because it just completely left my mind. I was really enjoying this cigar. The transition from the first to the second third starts very slowly, and it's not until the halfway point that we really start to see any distinctive changes. But once we get there, it is quite the distinctive evolution. The body increases from a medium to a medium full, and each of the notes do have their own little change, which is quite intriguing. For example, the coffee beans turn into a shot of espresso. The anise sort of transitions to a more herbaceous, more like charred bay leaf, and the sourdough has been baked into a nice big loaf of bread. You can just really taste that yeastiness and the flowers that we used in producing it. So really the changes in this cigar are quite pleasant, and I'm quite surprised in that I'm not having any issues. I'm actually smoking this on an empty stomach, which I thought was potentially a bad idea, but I didn't want to affect my palate either. And it's not as, I wouldn't say bland, but it's not as nondescript as I recall it being. That being said, these have been aged for a little while before they were transferred to the acrylic humidor in preparation for the review. And we are now well into the final third. Burn's still going quite well. It's corrected itself overall. There's a tiny little bit of waviness, but nothing, no runners or anything particularly disconcerting. And the ash has the same steely white color. It looks very, very good. So I'm just gonna, no, it doesn't want to come off. That's fine. In terms of flavor, we're getting the same espresso coffee as the second third. Nevertheless, the charred bay leaf has transitioned into more herby flavor, so I'd say charred thyme, and there's a distinctive pepperiness in the retrohale. The body is overall medium full. It's remained consistent with the second third, and it wasn't at all as overpowering as I experienced the last time. Indeed, it's quite subdued and much milder, but still around the medium third in terms of body, medium full in terms of body, and I'd say in terms of nicotine strength, still around the medium full area as well. As for the complexity, well, the cigar does have sort of peaks and troughs. The second third is incredibly complex, and the first third is quite intriguing as well. The final third doesn't quite offer the same nuance as the first two. Nevertheless, it has, I say nevertheless a lot, don't I? Well, I'll keep at it. At least it makes me sound somewhat articulate. The mouthfeel is quite smooth and velvety, leaving a nice, almost copper-tasting texture on the tongue, and the astringence is very balanced. You don't have too much dryness or over-salivation. This leads on to this palate stimulation, which is quite balanced as well throughout the whole palate. You don't have any areas that are overly stimulated. That being said, in the first third, the tip of the tongue does get extra bits of sweet spice, such as the anise. The life cycle is quite developed overall. You do have some distinctive evolution, especially between the first and second third. The final third, though, doesn't quite offer the same transition. And finally, the finish is quite lingering. It's going to stay on the palate for a while. You could consider accompanying this with a beverage just to cleanse it or to extend those final flavors. As for the residual scent in the room, it is quite fragrant, herbaceous, and not too strong. This leads me onto the burn, and as I mentioned earlier, the draw was quite tight. I massaged it a little bit, and it's opened up a little bit, so it's quite ideal now. We've got a good airflow here. The temperature remains cool all the way through. The backbone, as you can see, is nice and strong. I'm going to break this off just to see what it looks like underneath. So yeah, that's okay. And nice strong ash. And the burn angle, it does correct itself. There is some initial waviness, but it does correct itself quite nicely. Overall smoking time, you're looking at between an hour and 10, an hour and 30, depending on your smoking speed. If you really want to take your time, that's where you're going to get the most benefits from the cigar. You're looking at an hour 30, but I've smoked this, I'd say, in about an hour and 20 minutes once I've finished. Finally, the overall experience of the cigar. So as you can see, it comes with 3 bands. That is the case with most Plasencia cigars of the Alma range, which I think is their only range. The band on the foot, the main band, and the final tertiary band, as I like to call it, which just leaves a nice bit of ornamentation on your cigar once you're near the nub. I quite like this, especially on the Robusto, because the main band is quite large, and it doesn't mean that you're going to have a naked cigar if you enjoy having some decoration. Some people might find the use of 3 bands perhaps overdoing it, but I don't mind. I do like a well-presented cigar, so that's not an issue for me. Next, the box. I don't have the box on me, but in the written review, in the link in the description below, you will see what it looks like. And what's really cool about this box, it's beautifully presented, but it also comes with an ashtray. Now, I don't know if that's the case of all the boxes that you get, but certainly the one that Paul acquired when he purchased a whole box. This leads me on to the value. So if you're buying these as singles, they're $15 each, which may seem a bit pricey, especially for a Robusto. That being said, when you do get a whole box, it comes in boxes of 10. It's about $150, and sometimes you can get them a little less, depending if the tobacconist or the website is having a couple of sales, and it comes with that ashtray. So there is added value there. In terms of occasion, this is a very versatile cigar. It's not going to be super beginner friendly. It might give them a shock with the nicotine powerhouse that it can have. But in terms of presentation, this is something you can certainly use for a special occasion. It would fit in quite nicely with the color scheme of a wedding or even a christening, if that is a place where you smoke cigars, or bachelor parties, and even perhaps for a New Year's celebration. Also, in terms of the time that you would consider smoking this, you could smoke it quite happily in the late afternoon to evening, so during daylight hours and even at nighttime, given that it does have this kind of deceptive light color, but it's still quite full in body. And finally, that leads me to pairings, which are the bottom right-hand corner of the cigar formula, but isn't a scored part of it. It's just a thought exercise. I would show you, but as I usually do in most reviews, but it's covered in pens and bands, and I don't want to make a mess. In terms of food, I'd first suggest something like a croissant, something quite yeasty that would really bring out those sourdough notes. Croissant's going to have a certain sweetness and butteriness to it that would help marinate those flavors. Pretzels would be a good alternative in a similar sense if you prefer something more savory. Otherwise, consider a pork filet mignon that's been marinated in herbs and spices. That would go quite well with the charred bay leaf, thyme, and anise notes. Moving on to beverages, given that we do have this distinctive anise flavor, I would certainly go with a pastis like a Ricard or even a Pernod. I have a preference for Ricard myself. That would really bring out the aniseed. Otherwise, if you want something to wet your whistle, especially if you find that the nicotine content here is a little bit strong, consider something a little bit more watered down, such as an IPA beer or even a lager. And finally, if you're fond of your whiskies with cigars, a Speyside will have the qualities that would pair well with the Alma del Campo. And of course, this does have coffee notes all the way through, so coffee would be an excellent pairing, perhaps an Americano if you want something a little bit long to give you also a bit of hydration while you're smoking this. That's all from me today. I hope you've enjoyed this review. If you have, give us a like, give us a subscribe for more, and leave a comment if you have any questions or comments about the Alma del Campo. And until our next video, head to bespokeunit.com and see all the other lifestyle subjects that we cover. I'm sure that there will be something that you'll love.